I wanted to make this video today because I'm coaching a lot of different clients on how to break into tech sales, and I see some really common themes I want to summarize here, whether you're looking to break in as an SDR for the first time, or maybe moving from SDR to account executive, or moving as an account executive to a different company altogether. One of the biggest things that I see that candidates undervalue themselves in is just creating a coherent story as to why you made the decisions that you made. So as an example, if you're coming, and let's look at the SDR level first, right? If you're coming in from a different career altogether, I don't care if you tried to be a real estate agent for 2 years and then tried to be a customer support rep at something else and now you want to break into tech sales. A lot of people get worried like, oh, I've had 3 jobs or I've done all these different things. And sure, let the employer assess if that's a risk for them. But at the end of the day, if you at the entry level of tech sales can tell me why you made the decisions that you made and thus really convince me that tech sales is something you want to commit at least 4 to 5 years to, that's all that matters. Don't overcomplicate, well, I did this job, and then I did this, right? Create a cohesive story as to why you did what you did and use that story as a way to say, because of these experiences, I'm very excited now and sure that tech sales is the long-term future for my career, right? As an account executive, my first 2 years, I was a global #1 seller of our cloud product 2 years in a row. I was President's Club, etc., lots of different awards. But if I'm being completely honest, I was being underpaid for the results that I was delivering to the company, especially having done it multiple years in a row, not just getting lucky 1 year. And so that was a big thing and a big revelation for me when I went elsewhere. I was like, hey, of course companies want to talk to me. I'm the global #1 seller, etc. But on paper, when they see someone that has been a global #1 performer year after year, why are they looking for a different job? And so that was a question that I was really honestly not expecting, and I got early on in a couple of my interview processes. But again, it was just a matter of now taking that experience and creating a really compelling story as to why I wanted to leave. All that to say, I think this highlights one of the biggest problems that I see commonly from different candidates is you're not putting yourselves in the shoes of a manager at every level of the interview process and really asking yourselves, what do they want to see? And I'm not talking about the common mistake of talking too much about your background or all these different things. A lot of people don't structure and prioritize the types of information they're communicating when breaking in as an SDR or when transitioning to a different account executive role altogether. This speaks to the second largest point, which for me is I think a lot of SDRs breaking into the industry undervalue the past experience they had. I've talked already about how to create a cohesive story, and you want to use and just explain the decision process that you made when changing from this job to this job, or when now trying to break into tech sales. If you have a very compelling story, that's great. But now I also think people significantly undervalue taking their past work experience and putting it in the context that a sales manager or a recruiting manager might actually appreciate. Again, as an example, I'm working with a couple different people, one of which right now is a software engineer. And while, again, maybe they've never sold anything before, the fact that for the last 4 years, they've been around individual developers. They have done and completed projects for managers, for VPs of engineering, and even the CTO directly. The fact that you have been in the trenches and are communicating with the exact types of people that you would sell to is a very, very compelling thing to a hiring manager and to a sales manager. But oftentimes, people aren't calling that out either in their resume or in the stories that they're communicating in an interview. So as an example, I'm a former engineer myself, right? A lot of the things that I did, I can attribute back to an increase in efficiency or an increase in revenue, etc., whatever it might be, or even creating different opportunities. As a support engineer, oftentimes I found that different clients were doing things inefficiently, and I was able to drive a successful technical adoption, which led to increases in efficiency, etc., right? And also, there were other times where I would work with clients that were using outdated processes, outdated tools, and I would then uncover the fact that they could buy a newer tool that did things way faster or had other capabilities that aligned well to that. And even though I didn't sell them, I created a conversation and was able to foster that communication with the sales team. And even in maybe less directly of a customer-facing role, like in the example of the engineer I mentioned to you, just the fact that you're driving conversations and completing projects for these stakeholders, double down on that in your resume. Did you have to present routinely to the VP of engineering, to the CTO? Did you identify and improve processes by, say, 20%, which you can account to then maybe a day's worth of time per month back to the engineering team, which then, if you take a level further, can equate to freed up revenue and more opportunity for that company from a business and bottom line perspective. Even looking at different adjacent careers, right? You can apply this framework to other careers. One of my colleagues was a very high-level chef, ultimately finds themselves now in tech sales. But the same thing there. Did you identify inefficient processes at peak business hours? Did you do anything, as an example, whether you were a chef, whether you were working as a waiter, a bartender, did you implement a new special or identify ways to get repeat customers? Improve ticket orders by adding different relevant add-ons or whatever it might be, right? And these are the things that I think people are afraid of because they're like, oh, it's restaurant industry experience, or oh, I did that only in marketing. That's not directly relevant to sales. But these are the types of things and the stories that, again, maybe if you're increasing the average order size by $20 because it's a restaurant, we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars. That being said, you could say that that piqued your interest in sales. The ability to upsell, the ability to improve your tip, your compensation in any way, shape, or form got you really researching into sales. And over the last X amount of time, I've been doing research, I've been networking as best as possible, and ultimately I'm talking to you here today because I'm very confident that tech sales is the best path for me looking forward for the next 5 years of my career at a minimum, right? And you see how we tie all these different relevant things together and the story starts to become that much more compelling. Again, in the case that maybe you've been in a tech world but not in a direct sales role, try and take your activities and map that to revenue generating activities or positive business outcomes. Doesn't have to mean that you can say with 100% certainty that you got $50,000 on the bottom line for the company. But again, if you improved a process by 20%, you automated a task that used to be manual and take X amount of time. Dive into this experience and create that story and then tie it into the fact that that got you excited about leading a positive business outcome with a broader impact than your past role as an engineer, as a marketer, as a customer success rep, as a chef, etc., right? And so again, if there's anything that I'd say, a lot of people have a lot of great energy and enthusiasm when trying to break in. And again, it's not that what you're saying is necessarily bad, but is it optimized? And the way that you answer that question is asking yourself, what does a hiring manager, what does a sales manager care about? And I would bucket this on a few things. If you don't have past sales experience, it's trying to get your past experience in terms of who did you influence? Did you drive a meaningful change? And in an ideal world, you can tie that exactly back to revenue. If you're moving from account executive at one company to another company, lead with your results. That's what everybody wants to hear. And yes, there's conversations to be had around many companies. Of course, everyone's gonna say they hit quota, right? But at the same time, lead with the fact and act like you've been there before. Coming in with strong numbers at a minimum now gets me asking more about your sales process, more about your sales methodology. And obviously from there, that's a separate video of in itself I do plan on making here in the future. But just ask yourself, the recruiter, the sales manager, what do they care about? The recruiter wants to make sure you're pretty sane. You can handle a conversation, you clearly have an interest to be here, and ideally if you have an impressive background, that's pretty much it. Like I've said in other videos, they're gonna ask you, hey, tell me about your background, tell me about why you're interested in tech sales, and tell me about why you're interested in this company. As we go to a sales manager, again, if you can think of things, even if it's not a one-to-one match, did you improve obviously a revenue generating activity or improve the way that a company was making money? If you can get even more specific, can you think about the impact that you had on an annual recurring basis? Did you improve a process by 20% in such that it gave the company back $1,000 a month of unused labor time? And as you get into these different things that sales managers care about, like monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue, total contract value, maybe you come from a different sales background and you sold something that was worth on average $30,000 like a car. These are the things that if you put in your resume, you show you're already thinking about things in the way that a B2B tech sales company thinks. So if your average car sale was $30,000, that's a great stat. That's an average price point, give or take, for many SaaS companies as an initial land. Another one that comes to mind is churn. Were you able to keep end users engaged with your product? Did you do something that made a process that much better so that customers used your product longer, or you didn't lose a customer because you did something that really improved a product or made something better, right? These are all ideas, but again, don't be afraid to dive into your experience and get it all out there. Ideally, you can then repackage it in a way for that recruiter that makes a very logical story of why you made the decisions that you made and why that showed you that the next step in your career and what you're very excited about is tech sales. As we get to that sales manager interview, Can we take our past experience and try and put that in terms of monthly revenue, annual revenue, the things we just talked about, right? But really don't be afraid. And again, I'm never one to say lie, right? But really squeeze in and think about the fact that a lot of the things that you did, while maybe they didn't seem important at the time, or maybe you weren't directly connected to the revenue team, it's not unreasonable for you to go and reach and say that something you did directly impacted revenue when you really think through these things much further. But I hope that helps provide perspective. Again, there's no one answer here. And if you ever did want to book coaching, I do have links in the description for one-on-one as well as our bootcamp. But if you do have any questions, feel free to fire away in the comments below, and we will see you in our next video. Appreciate it.